Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant.
My name is Niels Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent, non-commercial podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. One of the key reasons for my motivation to build this podcast was because I could not find any podcasts on EU R&D funding back when I was working as a private consultant. The rest is history, and you are now listening to the result. However, as I have moved on, I indeed have identified other podcast initiatives, and I'm strongly supporting them. We need more sound. Independent grants consultant Ilaria Rudisi, creator of the Italian language podcast Dinamica Europa, and innovation hub manager Tomas Pavlik, creator of the Slovak-languaged podcast Grant Up, are running two of the most steady podcasts on EU R&D funding in Europe. To explain what moves us podcasters and hopefully inspire others to get going, I invited them into the virtual podcast studio for a talk about what is driving them forward and giving some advice to others who would like to get started. It became a nice talk about how a big heart for the EU funding and communicating via sound can shape beautiful new universes to move people in the real world. Please enjoy.
Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Today, it's going to be an interesting special. You, dear listeners, especially my regulars, have been following me for a while, naturally. So I have a lot of content here. I've been doing this since last spring. My motivation when I started this was that I couldn't find any podcasts on EU R&D funding myself back some years ago when I was a grants professional. So I threw myself at this to build a podcast on this, and the rest is history in terms of the grant. But meanwhile, I have discovered. So when you start to stir in the pot, then suddenly stuff comes up, and I realized that there are actually a few others out there. Which I have connected to now. I've already been talking way too much because I have guests in the studio. I have two guests in the virtual podcast studio today. So first of all, Ilaria and Tomas, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Hi Niels, hi. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. And I've been actually looking forward to this for a long time. We've been circling around finding a date to be able to do this. And the reason why I wanted to do this is that I was so happy when I realized that there were other people out there actually with the same beating heart for delivering audible guides and zooming in on this sector, that I connected immediately with you guys and started to exchanging with you and liking your stuff on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. But to push that even further up in my own mission, so to say, my own quest to spread knowledge about this, I wanted to shed light, not only because in my own podcast, that's shedding light on my own podcast, naturally, whatever I do every week, but I also want to shed light on yours and making people realize that there are other people out there doing a similar thing. And exchange and maybe synergies. So, but we'll get back to all these things later. Now, ladies first, Ilaria, it's not the first time you're with me on board.
No.
You and me, we recorded one of the most praised episodes in my podcast series some time ago. So regulars, they might remember your kind voice, but maybe you already share with us, maybe you share with us for the new listeners your background.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Niels, to have me in this podcast once again. I'm Ilaria. I'm an Italian consultant, and I founded my consultancy firm in 2020. And since then, I worked on a lot of EU grants application, and I work with several beneficiaries, university, researcher, NGO, enterprise, and I have a vertical focus on European grants. And I'm not alone. I have also a team that work with me because I believe that doing this job alone, it could be quite tricky sometimes. And so for this reason, it was a huge pleasure for me to meet you, Niels, and other colleague. Thanks also to this podcast.
Indeed, we'll get back to that in a second. But you have a small company, and you're a grants consultant.
Yes.
Thanks, Tomas.
Yeah, I have a university background. I've been working at the Technical University of Košice. This is situated in the eastern part of Slovakia, the second largest city in Slovakia. And I've been working there for more than 10 years, where I have been involved in the development of research and innovation projects. Mm-hmm. I started with R&I projects at the Faculty of Mining, where I started directly with international projects and Horizon. But the focus of my work were the EIT projects, European Innovation and Technology Institute, European Innovation and Technology Institute. How it is confusing with all those abbreviations. Sorry. And specifically, it was EIT raw materials. And later, I headed the project department at the faculty and also managed EIT RIS Hub, which was established and founded in Košice, where I actually live and work. Currently, I'm working at the University Science Park. It is called Technicom, as an advisor of the Enterprise Europe Network, EEN, for EU financial instruments, which is very interesting because I have daily contact with our SMEs. I have an overview of their needs and experiences, gaps, and so on. But I also work on other projects such as Ulysses Alliance, where our university is a partner, and other projects. And since 2022, I'm a part of national delegation as a national contact point, so NCP, for Horizon Europe in Slovakia for Cluster 4, especially in the field of digitalization. So, and last but not least, I founded the online magazine and podcast Grant App, which communicates grant topics in a clear way. This is maybe the most important thing to say for today's podcast.
Well, everything is important in this respect because there's a reason for this. Now, I chose to call this episode "When the Spirit Can't Be Held Down," because this is, I guess, a square root for the three of us that we have been working with this EU funding area for many years. And all of us, we have a beating heart for this area, and we want to spread the knowledge about this because we have a very strong feeling for it, and that everybody will feel this throughout this episode, because this is exactly why we're doing what we're doing, all three of us, the podcast, because we could just choose to do our day-to-day job, handle that. I'm sure that both of you are busy people. I have a very nice daytime job that is not so busy as working as a grant consultant, for instance. But we could do something else, right, in our spare time than doing this. So this is definitely a square root thing that we will get back to. The topic of today will be, of course, the podcast that we are doing, and maybe we start with the available landscape of what is actually out there, because podcasting is something that has been growing. If we zoom out and look generally looking at podcasts as a medium, that has grown over the last 10 years to be an important part of the media landscape. It's more and more growing in especially news, but also in all sorts of areas, cooking, all kinds of hobby areas. People are like history, whatever. It's an area that has a lot of growth potential and has done so as well, at least in Denmark. But for some reason, it's the three of us here. We are representing the majority of what's happening on podcasting in Europe today. It's the three of us. I have not identified other podcasts than us. I have identified a series of three, for instance, where some organization, they have paid a communication company to develop 3 episodes in a series, and then they do it once per year. But it has nothing to do with a steady running podcast that is continuously developed content. Have you, Ilaria? There's some Italian also doing some, but is that a steady initiative or what is it?
No, there aren't. There is some magazine specialized in economy that produce some episodes, as you said before, on EU grants or maybe on cohesion funds, but they are not so vertical like mine, like my podcast here in Italy. That is the first podcast on EU grants here in Italy. And this is the reason why I decided to start this podcast. Also, to involve people, companies, university, and NGO to get involved in EU grants field, because here in Italy is not so usually to submit EU grants proposal, but I would like to change this kind of this kind of attitude here in Italy, because I believe that EU grants are a huge opportunity. And if I don't believe that, I will not podcasting about that.
No, Tomas, did you, before you started your podcast, did you make sort of a market research, so to say? Did you look into this? What was out there before you started yours? Or
Actually, not. This is quite a new information for me, Niels. What you are saying, that there is no one else consistently producing any podcast on this topic. So good for us, but not good for the ecosystem in the Europe.
And see, this is the thing, because what is tricky here is that you have lots of content on YouTube. You have lots of video materials. You have a lot of webinars recorded. You have lots of these kind of things, where you have produced, but you have, of course, the things that the Commission produces in relation to information, online information events. But you also have some people producing where you can see on the screen overview on how to develop a work package or something like this. But for some reason, I don't know what it is that is blocking people, but I have two theories myself. So there's so much video content that organizations that would think about how they should disseminate information about funding, they think it's better to show it on a video. It's better to make videos because we need to show how the work package is built up. We need to, I don't know, it's maybe something like this. But my other theory, because I thoroughly investigated before I started this to understand if I, for instance, could make a business model out of it, if I could somehow eventually earn money on this so I could live out of it. So I looked into it from a market investigation point of view. So what's out there? And I realized from my own deduction that probably it's too difficult to, as an organization, to develop this without being fixed on the channel. Because if you have, say, if it's a public organization, NCP organization like yours, Thomas, then if your manager, if your director in the agency would say, okay, we do this, then they would say, but we need to focus on our priorities from a national Slovak point of view. Or if Denmark would do, Denmark is one of the places where the agency has paid a development company to make 3 episodes every summer. And that's, of course, focusing on Danish stakeholders, right? It's focused on the possibilities for Danes to attract money, because that's what the agency, that's how they spend the money in relation to the government. So that's what their target is towards the minister. If it would be a private company, grants consultancy, they would be focused on getting clients. So there would be an angle of not wasting time, so to say, on softer areas, softer angles, and so on. So I realized that it's probably not that an easy business case or case of if you want to do something that is broadly looking at the whole thing without losing money. That's my own theory, and that's when I started mine, then I thought, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want. This is it's the best way is probably just to start myself without doing anything with anybody. I'm just going to do it like I want it to be done. Then I can do exactly what I want. No, that was a long fly-in. Maybe we don't keep people in oblivion. Let's move on to introducing the podcast. So then I don't know, Ilaria, do you want to start introducing what it is you're doing?
Yes. Okay, I can share with you that when I decided to start my podcast, it was summer in July, and I had this suddenly idea, and I said, okay, yes, I have to realize the podcast on EU grants, and after I had a difficulty, I should find someone who was able to help me, because I couldn't how to record a podcast. I don't know anything about recording, which kind of microphone I should use, and this kind of stuff. And so I meet a specialized woman who does a podcast recording for work, and we started this project. And everyone who I was talking about this project, they look at me as if I was crazy, and they told me, "What are you saying? Which kind of people should listen about your podcast?" And but a lot of people listen about Dinamica Europa, and Dinamica Europa is becoming the lighthouse in EU grants educational content here in Italy, and I'm more than proud of that. It asks a lot of hard work, because, as you said before, I can spend my spare time in other way, but I really believe that we should start on educate NGO organization and enterprise about this kind of opportunity, because it's not only attract money, but participate and submit EU grants should be a strategy, a development strategy of your organization. So this was the main reason why I started my podcast. And I don't know if you want to know something else about the podcast.
We take it into action here and take the sub bullets here in between us. So slowly moving on. So we take them. So Tomas, can you share how you started?
Yeah, of course. Actually, we started at the end of 2020, and the whole idea came about rather interestingly when I was leafing through Forbes magazine on vacation, and I thought, why such a magazine could not be also be created in the field of grants? And I originally intended. Granta was intended as a paper version of the magazine. Something in the style of Forbes, and we would sell it by monthly subscription fee or something.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Good to have.
What kind of
ambition,
people with? But what kind of people with listed such a magazines.
Yeah.
Maybe. We actually started preparing the concept. We had the first issue in development, but there we very quickly realized that it was too big challenge for us to begin with, for which we are not yet ready in capacity or financially. So we jumped into it directly, but we rather stopped it and reconsidered the business model. At that time, we had already created a website with several online articles, something like blogs or something. So we decided to keep at least an online magazine there. And in addition, we used to make podcasts and earn from advertising and come up with some other business cases later. So this is how the Grant App concept was born. And I will add one more thing. By working with grants and observing that I have significant knowledge in this area compared to people around me, people came to me for advice and so on. So I was understandably looking for a way to use this in my own business. But I knew for sure that I didn't want to run a consulting company. I didn't want to write projects from different reasons. That's something I'm clear about. It just doesn't suit me personally. It's just personal thing. It requires a lot of time, a lot of energy, even when we are talking about managing the other project managers. So for me, not. Just I wanted something light, possibly lifestyle. That's why the magazine and podcast was created.
That's a nice story. Regulars will know that I started up when I was triggered by the fact that I couldn't find a podcaster when I was looking for one, and I didn't really like very much to be a grants consultant. Ilaria, fantastic. We have people like you that actually wants to write proposals. I didn't like my job very much, and I was trying to find out if there was a way I could get out of it. So I looked into that, and I couldn't really get my head around how I would, if I should suggest it as a business model to the company I worked for, or if I should do something. I was looking at different business models where I could earn money in one way, and then that would fund the podcasting, because I knew I couldn't charge money for that, and so on and so forth. But I ended up, fate had it that I was laid off by my employer. So that was it, Then I started to record, and I already tried out 2 different podcasts at the time when I got the idea of podcasting. So I was doing one on running and one on the band that I'm playing in, the rock band I'm playing in, just to test out how it is to do interviews, how it is to co-host, how it is to put up a rundown, how it is recording and editing and all these kind of things. So I was sort of ready technically, and then I started to record. And so, that's the story behind mine. And I guess for all of us, for me at least, I have an opinion about things, right? I have an opinion about. I've been doing a lot of different things within the funding world, and I have an opinion about it. So I have so much knowledge, and I have an opinion about things. So I wanted to share that, and then also have a lot of content with guests that to share it with people. I guess an underlying thread for me is that I want to help all the people who cannot necessarily afford Ilaria to help them. Yeah, because you have a lot of people out there, they don't have the opportunity throughout all over Europe that wants to access these things. But the way that it has been set up, the whole system, it's just complex as hell, So for them, and then for an added value, right? Also for consultants. I wanted to make a corner for consultants like Ilaria, like I used to be myself, to have a place to share and exchange on how you work. And for people like you, Tomas, I wanted to make a place also for the NCPs and for the people that do from the public side work on these things and exchange how they work from a national perspective and how processes and so on. So there's so many things about this that I just the more I work with it, the more I feel that there's so much knowledge I want to share with people who work within different corners. Eli, you don't make a continuous running podcast. You make a seasonal. You have chosen a seasonal approach, probably because
Yes.
you are a grants consultant, so you don't have the time to sit and make a continuously fun. So tell us a little bit about the angle and your setup with the podcast.
Yes, I run a seasonal podcast because I trust my podcast consultant, and she said that for Italian market for the Italian podcast market, is better to run a seasonal podcast to keep the attention of listener very high. So we realized the first season, and I will be I will be like the water, and I say to you that it was a trial because we didn't know how the listener would react to this podcast, because it's a technical one. It's a podcast where we explain how EU Grants works, how you can use EU Grants, and maybe it could be a little bit boring because generally you listen podcasts while you drive, while you're cooking, and so, but people listen this podcast very much. And the first season, I started focus on tools and strategy to work with EU funds, and I explain how to create a consortium and also how to write a proposal. Obviously, is a general explanation on how to write a proposal, because I can explain that in a podcast. And I also focus on how to find the right grant, because I believe this is very important for people to know how to find the right grant, because if you are a small NGO, you have to find a grant suitable to you, and if you are university, you have to find a grant suitable for you. And then after this general overview, I moved to vertical focus on EU program as Horizon, Life, Creative Europe, Erasmus+, but I wasn't alone, because I believe, as you, Niels, that if we connect with other, we enrich ourselves and we enrich also our listeners. So I invited guests, and general kind of guests, or maybe some specialized guests, maybe on innovation, or also case study of people that successfully won EU grants. And in this case, I had this episode with an organization that won a new European House Call of Application. But this is not enough because there is still a lot of work to be done. So I'm recording right now the second season, and I will have special guests and I will share with you as soon as possible.
So so the season you recorded, the first season, how many episodes did you have in that?
8.
Okay. And it's the same number you go for in the second season?
Yes.
Okay. That's a nice format. You have it. It's not too little and it's not too much, since you have a very challenging job, resource intensive.
Yes, I planned it as an educational course that you can listen about. And so I believe that 8 episodes, 20-30 minutes for episode could be suitable.
Yeah.
And also the listener agree with me.
This is indeed something that this is also related to the podcast strategy we'll talk about a little later. So this how to build it up so you attract most listeners. But yeah. So for the episodes, are you recording them now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yesterday I recorded one for the second season, and then I leave for vacation, so I will record the other episode in December, and then we will be published the second season on January 2024.
Thanks. Tomas, can you share your angle, topics, and so on? What's your approach?
Yeah, actually, since we want to target a wide audience, but it still should be connected to the field of grants, we have set the topics as broadly as possible. As a rule, we cover EU topics such as digitalization, health, business and startups, research and innovation. But we also have authors' topics such as articles on how to write projects, even in podcast version, something about budget rules, sharing good practice, and then successful stories of various projects or maybe experience of the top applicants. Moreover, we have divided all of these that I have mentioned into a filter for entrepreneurs, for researchers, teachers, students, and the non-profit sector and the active citizen, so that each of these groups will find content for themselves.
And you have your frequencies is like mine. You release once per week, right?
We release interview. We release once 2 weeks or twice a month. Mm-hmm. And we also have a short format of something like grant news in a 5 minute to get overview about what's going on in the world of grants. And this is also issued twice a month. So basically, we produce one podcast a week, but not literally. Yeah.
What's your ambition, Ilaria, with the podcast?
Oh, my ambition. This is a quite difficult question, but the ambition is to reach as many people as possible, because in Italy, as I said before, EU grants, direct and structural funds are not so well known, and each organization lost a lot of opportunity every day, we can say. But first of all, I believe that I want to change how EU grants are perceived here in Italy, because here in Italy, a lot of people and a lot of organizations believe that EU grants is like a present, but this is not true, and we should change this mindset. And so with my podcast, I would like to explain to people that participate to EU grants, but also to national grants, is a matter of strategy, and without a strategy, you won't succeed in EU grants proposal. And I try to change the Italian mindset about that. And thanks to my podcast, I also starting work with some specialized magazine in economy here in Italy. And I wrote some articles once a month, because I have not so much spare time to do also that. And I believe that, as we said before, this is a way to create an ecosystem where we can provide a qualified information about EU grants.
Yeah. We owe the listeners to share a very important little detail. So the podcasts that you're both doing are in your national language. So yours is in Italian, and Tomas, yours is in Slovak. Yeah. Which is important for the listeners if they think, God, I need to go and listen to this stuff. So if you don't speak Italian or Slovak, it's going to be difficult for you out there. But this is a service indeed to make everybody in those language areas available to this, and also maybe inspire people in other places to do something like we're doing here. No. Tomas, ambition. Now you already mentioned Forbes.
Yeah.
So now and you change track to we did now we have sunk cost on the website. Let's put a podcast in there instead. Where are you moving with this? Are you
Yeah, we don't want to be a second Forbes. That's not the same. Our ambition is to discover new people all the time. So one of our audiences is also the so-called people who don't know that grants apply to them too. This means that we try to target with more general topics or to awaken even a person who knows nothing about grants and arouse in him him or her the interest that this area could also be suitable for him or her. You notice how I'm gender equal, yes. And we have a vision that grants are suitable for everyone. Of course, this is a lofty view, but in principle, we know that we mean we know what we mean by this and plan our actions accordingly. As for the overall ambition, we have been clear from the beginning that we want to go into to the EU in an English language environment. However, due to capacity reasons, we will deal with this only when we get the first big projects like Horizon Europe, thanks to which we will have the funding to operate such a platform. It is quite possible that in the beginning our topic will be will be structured or profiled according to the requirements or project topics, but we will gradually have the ambition to expand these topics on the same platform and gradually build a community of EU users so that when we communicate any project on this platform, it will be effectively targeted communication, and project coordinators will also be happy to have such space for the dissemination of their results, which must be communicated within the project. And of course, our credo is that project communication must be not boring. It has to be fun. The user has to want to go back again and discover new content regularly, whether it is video, audio, or just text or article.
Yeah, it's good because I would love that there would be more podcasts in English. It's not that I'm fine by being the only regular one that sends out English stuff like this, but you know what? There's so much content to cover. There would be space for 20 English-speaking podcasts covering. I see that myself, and there are so many things that I would love to have the time to dig into, but I don't. Even though I'm releasing every week, right? No, but that's good. Thomas. Just because we know that Ilaria, you are an independent consultant, so that sort of covers your work. But Thomas, are you doing this as part of the work that you're doing for the agency? So the podcasting part, is that something that's part of your job description with the agency, or is it something you do on the side?
Yeah, well, let's put it in this way. We cooperate with my employers or other organizations here, and they benefit from this.
Okay.
So this is a synergistic matter. So
you made your own initiative, and did you make a company?
Yeah.
Okay, so you registered a company. Okay, yeah,
of course.
Well, it's not because I did. My ambition from the beginning was that I would somehow find out along the way when I started it that how I could monetize, because I realized when I started I can't monetize on it, so I'm just going to do it from my heart. But I also realized that I would somehow try to, when I had basis enough episodes to show for, that I would somehow try to see how can I do this. But it's sort of come tumbling by itself. I didn't realize when I started that what the two of you and I am doing, it's actually very, very special. It has a very high value for the right organizations, because we have a lot of capacity and knowledge about EU funding. And then on top, we add a very specialized capacity on communication, because it's something that's quite expensive to get on the market if you want a communication company to develop this for you. So it's so let that be keep that in mind, both of you, that this is something, if you haven't already thought about it, that this is something that on the ambition side, it might, as I see it, if I do this right, if I continue what I'm doing now, then I might actually be able to live eventually as time live out of it if I get enough contacts. Also, maybe like having fixed annual contracts with content and stuff like this. These things because it's very. It's very difficult to find people like us, to be able to do this, because I'm not expensive. It's not expensive what I do, but it's for people that come outside. The price of what I do, I can market fairly high because it's difficult to find, and it's even going to be cheaper for people doing this with me than if they had to go somewhere else. No, so my ambition, I would love to live out of this. This would be fantastic, really.
Yeah, wow, it would be amazing. And this summer, someone wants to buy my podcast, and I say no, absolutely no.
Well, that's fantastic.
Because because it was a magazine and they don't want to pay enough money. But this is my creature, and I said no at all. And there is also an ironic that I want to share with you. They sent to me the agreement, and my lawyer read that agreement and laugh very loud about that agreement. And she said no at all. And I said okay, no.
So your lawyer laughed loud and said.
And she said, no at all. And I said to her, yes, but I have already decided on my own that it was a big no.
Mm-hmm. Are your intention to continue your podcast, Ilaria?
Yes, of course. I don't know after the second season, because with 2 seasons, I touch a lot of topics. And maybe on the 3rd season, I could focus more on European politics that are very important to know, to write grants and to participate in EU grants. But I have also another ambition, that is maybe that we could improve what we are doing here together, and maybe become one of the top voice of EU grants in Europe. But this is a big dream, I know.
You know what? When as long as we are so few, there's a lot of space. So it's if you already mentioned that you ranked fairly high on the Italian podcast list with yours. I can't claim that in my end, but it's so that you should keep and really build on, because that's wonderful. Then there's definitely you have a target group that is craving information if that's the case, because it is technical. So let's move on to the podcast strategy, because we are circling around it anyways, about how we work and how our approach to get the outreach and reach. So everything that we talked about here in the beginning, with why we're doing this, why it's so important for us to do this. So this is all a mirror. Our podcast, the 3 of us, we have sort of an approach, a strategy to reach that target, right? But maybe if we start with topics, we already talked a little bit about it, right? Ilaria, you shared with us that you sort of you put your foot in your big toe in the water with the first one, making it a little bit technical about how to prepare proposals. Now you have some interviews about them. You want to keep the suspense about that. So that's fine. But then you also just mentioned that you're talking about maybe politics and so on. How much time have you spent on reflecting yourself on, or do you have others? Do you have other people that you try to reflect together with what you should do with this? You mentioned you had a podcast coach, or a person that you share with. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts and how you work with this?
Yes, I planned alone the first season and also the second one because I really know my job and all the technicalities that are involved in my job. So I could imagine that another people write for me the script. This is out of page. Is not possible to do in this way. So I really love writing. So for me, it's not a difficult job to write script because basically I write every day, all day, because it's my job. And I plan the content of the first season and also the second season based on the needs of the people that I talk to every day.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can really understand. I start this podcast in the second year of my business, so I had 2 years to listen at my clients and to understand what they couldn't understand about this word, and so I try to explain that topic in my podcast. And as Thomas said before, it's not possible to go deeper in a podcast, but I try to touch a lot of topics just to light idea in the listener. So maybe they do a line, make some search, and then get deeper in the topic. And I am the mind behind my podcast. Yes, I have a podcast producer, but it's more for technicalities because produce the podcast is not my work. It's a pleasure for me and really is a part of corporate communication, of my corporate communication strategy. So my podcast producer helped me to record the episodes, and she takes care of publish episode on main platform and to fix the episode if we do some pause or if I did some mistake when I speak. So she cleared the episode and then she will publish for me. And I believe that having a podcast producer is fundamental if you have not time to understand how to use platform, how to record, how to make cut in the episode. And so I believe that in this way you can keep the beauty of doing a podcast and delegate the bad side of doing podcast that is technicalities that I don't like at all. So I'm really happy to have my podcast producer, and of course is an investment in terms of money. But I believe that in this way I could publish a very useful product. My podcast has a very clean audio, and listener can follow in a very easy way the entire episode and the entire podcast.
Yeah, you're touching upon things here that all three of us we are dealing with. So you know what you have done here, you have to let someone else do this. That's my best guess, because you are a grants consultant. And having been what you have your own company, having been one myself, even in a large corporation, what I do now, I would not be able to do that, but at all, when I was having that. It's not possible. So I can perfectly understand that you have outsourced. But you know what? Preparing a rundown, having a preparatory meeting with a guest and making the recording, that's probably 20-25% of the work.
Yes.
Especially when you start. it might be even 15% of the work when you start, because you're still learning. So it takes a long time to do the editing, getting the hang of it, having a landing page, developing that, understanding on the background of what you need to do with such a thing, how you need to how you need to register your podcast in what platforms, how all these things work with these things. You can get guides, but you need to understand it yourself, right? So Thomas, you're more in the end where I am, right? My impression is that you do a lot of these things. So do you do yourself the marketing, all the graphics and so on, or have you, like Ilaria, people that you are working together with that are doing these things for? Or how does that work?
It's very similar as you outlined, and maybe if I should say something about choosing a topics for a podcast. There's often no need to look for a system. Sometimes, of course, there is a need to urgently address that specific topic when it was, for example, during the COVID period. But most of the time, we find a guest randomly, or we have already had him on the list for a long time because we know he's doing something interesting, whether it's some research, or is doing something very interesting within projects, and we will contact him to see if he would be interested in coming to the podcast for an interview. However, I must say that more and more often it happens that people write or call us on their own and are interested in joining the podcast.
Yeah, that's what happens, right?
Yeah. And in the podcast, we mostly have people who are close to research, since my background also comes from the university environment, and even though I'm sitting in the university science park, so naturally I have the most contact here. But the composition is diverse. We often have people from innovative companies that implement their innovative activities through projects. Also non-profit organizations. We have people from municipalities, from ministries, agencies that, for example, provide some kind of grant scheme, and in this way want to spread information between potential applicants. We also already had a few students who managed to travel abroad for a study or research stay through a grant, Erasmus and so on. So it's really diverse. And I'm always happy if I can have a guest physically in the studio. That is, I try to look for guests from around my city, Košice, where I live. But of course, that is not always possible. And then it would be a pity not to use the potential of guests who are in other cities, for example, in Bratislava, our capital, or abroad. So we do it combined, both physically and online. Up until now, the format of online interviews has prevailed, but at the moment it is starting to break, and I have more and more guests in person in studio. That's interesting, maybe.
Yeah. Do you run a solo episode sometimes? Do you record where it's just you?
Sometimes, yes, but this is the case if it's critical to have some something in. Yeah, we have to something to publish, like today evening or yesterday or something, and well, I have to figure out something. Yeah, and.
Now, just like Ilaria, I'm just curious to understand. Do you do the full thing yourself? Do you record? Do you edit? Do you administer the upload of your episodes? Do you do the marketing on LinkedIn and so on? Is that something you do yourself, or do you have someone to help you?
Yeah, I have two helpers, so we are three so far. But this is very similar, as Ilaria said. This is a pleasure for me. So I really enjoy the process of identifying the guests, of the looking for something interesting to have in podcast, and to make a I don't know, preparation or bullet points for discussion and consult with him the process of the recording and recording itself, and even post-production is really my favorite activity. But that's all. And after that, I have my colleague who distribute the recording to the channels and to the social media and so on.
Okay, I'm a lone writer. I do everything because I don't have anyone to draw on here. So it's like this. I started it, and it's like this. It's it's probably going to stay like this. I have come into a working rhythm with it now. So but I must say that you probably, both of you, have done some investigation before. I did a lot of. There's an American podcaster who runs podcast about how to podcast. He's called David Huber. So I went through the book and I started to understand how to do this. So it's a big work. There's a lot of time invested from my side in this. How much did you reflect, both of you, before you started on what kind of target groups or length of your format, or how much, Ilaria, how much did you reflect on this? Did you consult with your partner there on how to do it, or did you yourself sort of sketch what you wanted to do? Or
Yeah, I did it myself, but because I said before, I realized this podcast to answer to my clients' big question. And so the target of my podcast basically are my clients, or better, the category of clients that I have. So NGO, university, SME enterprises, and so their needs are the needs of my listener. I believe that there are a lot of people that listen to Dinamica Europa that work in organization where they have a grant office, but I don't know if the same in your country, but here in Italy, maybe also if you have a grant office, especially in NGO, it does not mean that they are qualified, because sometimes there are employees that are put on grant office, but they don't really know what to do. And so my podcast was a guide for them. And I believe that also some people working in ministry or public entities, because they add me on LinkedIn, so I believe that they found out me listening my podcast. So basically, my podcast, as I said before, is a part of my corporate communication. So the study about the target, I was already done some year before, because I have also a communication strategy on social network like Instagram, LinkedIn. I run also a newsletter. And so basically, when I decided to start my podcast, I have a lot of information about my target.
Thomas, before you start this, did you realize what you realize now that you mentioned that so it's the people that you see when you work, that you want to share these kind of things? Or how much did you reflect over these things?
Yeah, it was clear to me, because I wanted to do. I've always wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to start podcast for a long time. I actually a long time before I actually started it, but I always missed the point, because I knew that if I just start doing a podcast, it wouldn't last long without a deeper sense,
Yeah.
So when I started my company, it was a clear decision. I started creating a podcast to build a community with some later monetization. So now and now in our third year of doing, we have released over 150 podcast episodes, and all with absolute accuracy every 2 weeks. I don't believe it myself, but person switches to autopilot after a while, and it goes.
Yeah. It's I did a lot of reflecting before I started, as I mentioned, right? I really did a lot of desktop research. I read about it, how to approach it, because I had no idea. I just like you, Thomas. I had an idea I wanted to podcast, and as I mentioned, then I started to make one on running, on my band. But I also had a list of different. I was brainstorming myself what topic could be interesting to work with, but this was always this was my little baby, on EU funding. It was there that I knew that with 15 years of experience working with this and working from all kinds of different angles, with an experience both public, facilitating, innovation cluster, private consultants. I had so much that I knew that could be something, right? But I would say I also knew, I mentioned it earlier, that I thought a lot about why other organizations didn't do this, because the target group would be fixed. And I knew when I did my approach with having a broad approach to it, I knew that my strategy had to be very long-term, slowly building up small sub the grant community, so to say. So I have an Erasmus Plus group now following me that knows that sometimes there's Erasmus Plus, and then I have a group that's following because of the Horizon that knows that sometimes the Horizon. Yeah, but no, that's not a very good. If you ask a professional podcast, say that's not a very it's not a very business wise strategy. Fix on one subject and then build up a huge group on that, and then but it's because I do it with the heart. So it's like I want to cover different areas. So that's my approach, and then I guess it's going to be like a ketchup bottle, hopefully, that then when there's so much content under each that it's going to be it's difficult how to approach it. Can you feel like are you earning more money as a consultant? Do you get more people who want quotes from you, leads for doing a job for them after you started the podcast? Can you?
Yes, of course. Because for me, the podcast is a marketing tool. So I believe that some people ask the podcast and then apply for the service. And I have also to thanks Innovazione Sociale, that is an Italian newspaper specialized in NGO, that talk about my podcast a lot of time, and they have a lot of followers on LinkedIn, and Innovazione Sociale is the most read newspaper on NGO and social innovation in Italy. So this was a big I don't know how to say, this was very important for my podcast to find a listener. And yes, of course, I believe that all of these things, my marketing tools, Innovazione Sociale, and other tools, also using SEO on Spotify, because if you write very well the title of your episodes, there is also podcasting SEO. I don't know everything about that. This is my podcast producer stuff. And of course, yes, I believe that this increased the number of my business, but I can say it for sure because I have also had the Google advertisement campaign, so I can't say to you where the clients come from, but of course, podcasts, it is an important meaning to attract clients.
Thomas, monetizing. So, are you? Do you see concrete development from the work you do with the podcast, where you say, okay, there might be an opportunity for me to do something with this. If you don't want to share because business model secrets don't, but if you want to share, is there anything where you can see this might actually mean that I can start earning a little bit on the side? Or
Yep, there's no secrets. If I have to summarize how it is with, let's say, with charity and commercialization, then certainly the charity activity prevails so far. That is, we do more for free than in return. But our intention was definitely to start building a stable community around grants. Enthusiasts who are active and interested in these things. And as we grow, our influence slowly begins to grow, and we gradually start to profit from advertising and sponsorship of podcasts. But this is a very small share, and it is enough only for, let's say, for overheads. But it's nice to be at the consultation and to or at some event and to hear from the participants that they have already they are regularly listening the podcast, and even though even maybe there are some cases that the information from the Grant Up, from our magazine, has helped them to get some funding. So that's very, very nice case for me, and that's enough for me in some moments.
Yeah, but I must say that's also something that, when I hear people say, "What is this? This is fantastic. I've been looking for this for years." This is it's just, it helps me so much. All these kind of people that get back to you. Also, when I do debate panels, for instance, with artificial intelligence, or the one I did with Ilaria there, when I get people getting back to me, thank you so much for picking up this topic, and we're so happy that finally someone is sharing wholeheartedly how difficult it is to work in this sector. It's so those kind of things. But I also have run into sometimes where people, they get a little starstruck, and I'm not prepared for that because I'm just podcasting, so cool, it's you. That's so weird. And when I invite people in, because for me, I'm still starting up, so yeah, we're going to do, oh, it's such an honor. But I'm happy if people perceive it as an honor, but it's funny that you start to get that because we all three, whether we want it or not, we get that aura around us that we are capacities within a subject, right? That we are strong experts on what we do. That's what happens when people they listen to someone, see it on TV or listen on radio or on podcast. Inspire others. I just wanted to, it's also an element of this episode, is maybe to kick other people in the butt out there in Europe to do something. So I don't know, what advice can we give something to start their own podcast? What would you say, Thomas, if people should do something like this?
Yeah, I think the general rules for podcasters apply here. You have to be really sure that you will enjoy it, that you see the point in it, and every week or 2 times a month or in a regularity, you want to spend time and produce some content. And if I had to recommend what to consider before starting a podcast, then definitely write down the first 10 or 15 podcast topics, including potential guests. You don't have to know them personally, but at least have an idea of what sector they are from, or who you would invite for an interview. And if I can't find it, then I'm probably going to have a hard time keeping the podcast active for a long time or in long term. Of course, if you are good at verbal expression, like you, Niels, you can also do solo themes without the second guest. So, yeah.
That's rough, but it's yes, I can. But it's I would say really you need to do your homework on content because it's. But the thing is, the good thing if you want to do something like this, both if you sit as a communication manager in an organization, or if you yourself out there sit somewhere and you want to do something extra in relation to your EU funding related job. There's so much to talk about. It's my byline to my it's my slogan. There's so much to talk about. There's so many topics you can dig into. I would say don't do like I did. Don't pick everything. I would probably, now I've started this quest and I my heart beat for it, so I'm just going to continue doing it and keep building up, right? So that's ambitious in that respect. But if I should start myself again, then I would pick one category of topic and then dig into that, because the thing is with this area, dear listeners out there, if you think this is interesting for you, there are so many listeners just with one core topic. You could make a podcast on how to communicate and disseminate EU projects. That could be a podcast. You can make a podcast only on live program and how to work with that. You can make one podcast on, there's so many podcast topics that could be one podcast running continuously. Don't have to run every month or every week. If you make a podcast with 12 episodes over the year, or if you do like Ilaria here doing series, there's lots to dig into. And there are so many listeners, because we haven't talked about this, because the target group that we're dealing with here, they can suck up so much information. They are people that sit and watch webinars from the Commission 3 hours in a row when you have info sessions and so on. They still have questions. They still want more. So it's a group of people. If it's professionals working with the area, they can suck up so much information. If you want to do something towards the beneficiaries, of course, it needs to be more like Ilaria, maybe 20, 25 minutes. Also like you, Tomas. Maybe it doesn't have to be too long. Long formats like the grant, that's for professionals, I would say. Yeah, it's because it's, but they can suck it up. That's the thing. Ilaria, do you have any? What would your advice be?
Yes, of course. My first advice is to ask a professional help, especially if you don't have experience with technicalities and voice editing, because of course upload an episode is quite easy, but have a technician during the recording, I believe, is an asset. So this is my first advice. And the second is to have enough madness and bravery. Madness because it's difficult things, especially to find guests. And as regards guests, I had a lot of bravery, because I asked two important people if we want to define them in this way here in Italy to participate in my podcast, and they accept, because they believe the idea to explain the EU grants was amazing, and they are people that work in innovation field here in Italy. They are journalists, but they recognize the value of my idea. So be brave.
Yeah, because I don't think the reason why podcasting is so great is that people can listen to it everywhere.
Yes.
Right? There's so much you can do with the sound medium, just to inspire you out there. You can have so many angles. You have so many approaches to this on developing, and the beauty about sound is that if you create a sound landscape, if you create a universe, then people get familiar with it, and they will follow you to the end if they tap into your discourse on what you do, and you can play with so many elements. I try to play sometimes with different segments and so on, how to work with my topic as a podcaster, and that's what you can do. Well, then you test. Sometimes then you have to adjust, and I guess all three of us have adjusted as we go. But the thing is, if you sit out there with a little bit of a spark, say, God, this could actually be interesting. Sit down, try to make a concept. Try to make it simple from the beginning. Try to make a concept around it, how you would attack the topic, and then just slowly, like Tomas said, sketch episodes out. Yeah? Slowly sketch out. I sort of tumbled into it like this. I just thought, how should I do this? I didn't approach any guest from the beginning, Thomas. I just sat and recorded myself episodes on. I made that timeline series, right? Where it was a step-by-step guide to do a proposal. I thought that, well, I'm gonna start with that, but and then I started to have something to show for when I reached out to people, and made it a little easier for me to attract guests. But now I practically only do guest episodes. But I guess, like Ilaria said, it requires you to be a little bit brave. Tomas, you probably had this. We all three had the same feeling, I guess, the first time we sat in front of the microphone. And I actually still get it sometimes when I have a guest in. Just before recording, I have a little bit of a sinking feeling, in my stomach, a little bit of tickling there, Oh, now we go, there's always a bit of how will this be, Would this be a good interview? Would this be a good conversation? Because sometimes it's a little... It runs a little bit rough, right? When you have a guest and you don't have a chemistry that sparks. So then you have to, because you're the professional podcast, you're the one that is supposed to facilitate a conversation. So you can't crash, right? You have to somehow get meaningful content that listeners find interesting to listen to. So yeah, but
I think it is an advantage of me as a laik that I'm not professional in the field, and I'm putting questions as ordinary people would maybe ask, and this is why it is so nice. In this way, we know to communicate the complex topics in an understandable way.
Yeah. No, maybe we should round it up slowly. Now I kept the challenges to the end. Ilaria, what's the roughest thing doing this?
Maybe to transform very difficult topics in topics for everyone. Because my mission is that allow everyone to approach EU grants, but sometimes I have these kind of difficulties because I'm a technician on the field. I try to talk with difficult words, and one of my main challenge is to try to adopt an easier language that everyone could understand.
Yeah. Tomas?
I would say we have a specialty here in Slovakia. I wouldn't say I wouldn't even say that there was anything difficult about creating a podcast for grants. One of the hardest things is definitely keeping the regularity. As I said, you don't always have time for it, or sometimes even if you have agreed with 2 or 3 guests, in the end, sometimes it happens that none of them can come or join at the given time, and you are left without an episode. It happened very few times, because I literally worked miracles. I always managed to produce, at least as we were talking, a solo episode or get a guest at the last minute. That was also happened. So this is one of those difficult things to be able to produce regularly. Another thing, and this is perhaps from a different point of view, as I had outlined, is to convince the community in Slovakia of the benefits of projects such as Horizon Europe, EIT, EIC, and other programs directly, let's say, directly managed by Brussels. Here in Slovakia, the negative experience of the implementation of the European structural investment funds prevails. Companies and organizations remember the high level of bureaucracy and the low level of transparency that's in short. And even from the national analysis prepared by the Research and Innovation Authority in Slovakia, it follows that the state and the applicants do not trust each other, and the state wants to improve this by setting up a new strategy. By this, however, I wanted to say that people naturally know ESIF, European Structural Investment Funds, and they think that Horizon Europe is the same mechanism. So we need to dispel myths and educate people that Brussels schemes are easier to implement, as well as from the point of administration, and it's sometimes incredibly easier, to quote the findings of some of the stakeholders here from Slovakia.
This is a universal, but I can tell you, this is a universal issue. It's the same in Italy. It's the same in Denmark. It's the same in Germany. Here we live. It's the same everywhere. That the general perception of funding from national or EU body, that's go away. So that's why it's so important what you do with your podcast, what we all three do with our podcast, because this is indeed, I think, many people out there that works with trying to people to get to apply more. They're very happy with what we do. We haven't even talked about the commission today. Yeah, I think, Thomas, reflecting myself on the topic, I think the regularity, I put myself under pressure with the once per week, right? That's rough. So I think that's probably that has been the biggest challenge, to keep up that pace. But I haven't missed one single Monday since the 31st of May 2022. And now because I have done it so much, and now I always have 3, 4, 5 podcasts in the box. So at any given time. So I always have something to take from. I have very short periods in the beginning where I was running a little bit out, but I managed to, and then, so now I'm good. So, but I perfectly understand you that can be an issue, because I get a lot of cancellations. And which is also part of, we haven't talked about that guests outreach and so on, how much time it actually takes. So when you run like we do, Thomas, every week, you have to keep it, the outreach strategy. I've also about the content strategy. So this is something that, to find time when you do everything, to find time to make a proper strategy, that's sometimes an issue for me, actually, because I reach out very intuitively sometimes and get guests in, but having a proper strategy on content, I only had the time this summer, for instance, to make the next move big strategy wise. So I'm going to make a series on implementation, right? I have a series on proposal preparation, but I'm also going to make one on implementation. But you have to make a strat. You need to make the list of episodes for that. You need to find out who can cover it for you and so on. And to start, so you need to have time to sit and do that in between the normal flow of podcast. Yeah, I know. Yeah, let's wind it up. But thank you so much for joining me for this. What I can tell the listeners, so what I will do on my website, since I'm trying to create a hub space there also, so I will make a corner on my website with links to Dinamica Europa and Grand Up. So anyone Slovak beneficiary and Italian, you can check out my website for podcasts in your own language about this. I can highly recommend it. I will, and as I go on, I will try to gather also whatever I find. There's also I have already had them in my podcast. They do a podcast on research, diversity in research and gender and so on. That's not specifically writing grants, but I will link to different podcasts that is working within the area. So that's for all you out there. Now, thanks for listening to the end. Hope you enjoyed this, us sharing a little bit about what we do and why we do it. Hope you got inspired, some of you. Go to my website to check that out. For everybody, thegrant.eu. Check the back catalog if you don't know. There should be a substantial amount of information there relevant for you if you are working with this. So check that out. And while you're there, subscribe to my email list. That's a currency in the podcast world. So please, by all means, if you sympathize with what I do here, please register for that. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Last message. That's where the fun happens. That's where the daily flow of liking Tomas and Ilaria's posts and sharing what they do together with all my rest of my community within this. So, Ilaria, Tomas, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Niels.
And as I know, Ilaria, you really want to collaborate, the three of us, on different things, and I can wholeheartedly say, indeed, so we will. This is not the last time that listeners you have been listening to the three of us in one way or the other collaborating on different things. So, Okay,
yes, of course, it will be a pleasure.
Now let's say goodbye to the dear listeners. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.